By the way, if I forget and somebody reminds me to record, that will be helpful. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so what were we saying? We were saying that the threshold voltage, we are assuming that the threshold voltage is constant across the width and the length. We are assuming that the conduction is constant, is uniform. Conduction across the cross section is uniform. And we know that we can see here very clearly that the channel resistance at any position along Y will not be constant. At the source end, it will be low because the cross section area is very large. At the drain end, the cross section area reduces, because of which the channel resistance is expected to be higher. So now let us consider a small segment of the channel here, which has a length of dy. It has a depth of d, and the width is w. So now as I move this segment from the source end to the drain end, dy is of course the length of the segment, and we will keep as constant. The depth will change. The width remains constant. The depth changes. At the source end, the depth will be maximum. At the drain end, it will be the smallest. Okay. So now in order to find an expression for the drain current, we need to find an expression for the incremental resistance in the channel region. Once we find an expression for the incremental resistance, we'll integrate it from the source to the drain to find the total effective resistance. And once we find that, just dividing by the drain to source voltage will give us an expression for the current. So that's all that is there to it. So first we need to find an incremental resistance, then we'll integrate it along the y-axis. So the resistance is not constant, it depends on the position along y. So the incremental resistance will be a function of the y-axis. In this case, the y-axis goes from 0 to capital L, where L is the length of the channel. So the conductivity of the segment is given by sigma of y. So conductivity is not constant. It depends on the position y along the channel. Is given by the charge of the electron E, the mobility of the n-type carriers, which is represented as mu n, and n of y, where n of y is the density of charge carriers, which again depends on the position y. Okay. So we assume that the mobility is constant, and charge of an electron is of course a fundamental constant. So if capital N of y is the total number of charge carriers in the volume of the channel segment, that is this shaded segment of channel that we have, if capital N of y is the total number of charge carriers, we can write small n of y, which is the density of charge carriers, as capital N of y divided by the volume of this segment. What is the volume of the segment? It's basically W, which is the width, the depth is d, and the length is dy. So WD into dy is the volume of the channel, and total number of charge carriers divided by volume will give us the density. Okay. So now we can write this incremental conductance of the channel sigma of y as mu n into E into, what we have done is we have replaced this density of charge carriers with this expression here that we have in terms of total number of carriers and the volume of the segment. So that is what is done here. Okay, so E into N of y is the total charge in the segment, which can be written as QTY. So the total number of charge carriers in this volume is N of y into E is now the charge in the segment just below the in that volume that we have shaded here. Okay, so this QT of y, which is nothing but E into N of y, can be written as Q of y into W into dy. What is W? W is again the width of the channel, and dy is the length. So Q of y is the charge density. And why am I writing this? Because I can write an expression for Q of y in terms of the oxide capacitance per unit area. So Q of y can be written as Cox into Vgs minus Vt into Vcy. So this comes from the simple capacitor equation as that Q is equal to C into V. Okay, so in this case, what I'm writing expression for Q of Y, which is per density per unit area, which will be in terms of Cox, which is again capacitance per unit area, into the voltage across the capacitor. Now, mind you that until if the voltage across the capacitor is less than Vt, then there are no charges. It's only when the voltage exceeds the threshold voltage, it's only then that the channel is inverted and there is charge across this capacitor. So what we have here is Q of Y will be Cox into Vgs minus Vt into minus Vt minus Vc of Y. This equation is not valid for Vgs less than Vt, of course. So we are on this equation we are writing only when there is an inversion channel present. So we should remember that it's not valid when Vgs is less than Vt. And Vc of Y is the potential of the channel, which is again a function of Y. So the channel potential changes from VDS at the drain end to 0 at the source end. So Vc of Y is also a function of Y. The channel potential changes from VDS to 0 as you go from the source to the drain to the source. So the charge density Q of Y is given by this expression. Now we can substitute this there and we'll get a expression for sigma of Y. So sigma of Y is nothing but the conductivity of the segment, which is given by mu n into, I've just plugged this in instead of E into n of Y. Okay, so then W and dy and dy will get cancelled. So now that we have an expression for the conductivity, we can find an expression for the incremental resistance of that segment. So what is the incremental resistance? It is nothing but 1 upon sigma of Y into length of the segment is dy and cross section area is W into D. Okay, now we can just simplify this. We have an expression for sigma of Y. Substituting that, we will get, this is 1 upon sigma Y. We get D upon mu n into Qy into dy upon Wd. Now d and d will get cancelled and we get an incremental resistance as dy divided by mu n into Q of Y into W. So now we have an expression for the incremental resistance. So we can find an expression for the incremental drop across the channel segment. So what is the voltage drop across this segment? So this is nothing but V is equal to I into R. So we have I is IDS and incremental resistance R is nothing but dr. So we have an expression for dr from the previous slide, which is this dy upon Q mu1 Qy into W. If you plug that in here, what we get? The incremental voltage dVc across this channel segment, voltage across the incremental channel segment with IDS into dy upon mu n into Qy into W. Note IDS is constant, right? There is no, it's the total drain current. So that has to be, that is not a function of any position parameter. It's a constant. It will be fixed. So now we can just rearrange this. So IDS into dy will be, I'm just taking this on this side. So IDS into dy will be mu n into W Qy into dVc. Okay, Qy, we again have an expression for it in terms of Cox. So this will be mu n into W into Cox. Vgs minus Vtn minus Vc of Y, where Vc of Y is the potential of the channel at that location Y into dVc. So now we have an expression in terms of voltage and current, but voltage is the voltage across the channel segment. Now if you want to find the total expression in terms of the drain to source voltage, all that we need to do is integrate this expression from over the entire channel. So my dy changes from 0 to L. So dy is the incremental channel length of the incremental segment. If you integrate this expression from 0 to L, you will get the total drain current I, and on the right side, the limits of the integration will be at the source end, the potential is 0. At the drain end, the potential is VDS, right? So this is at the source end, and this is at the drain end. And of course, this is the length of the channel. So 0 to L is the length of the channel. So now integral of dy, IDS is constant, so integral of dy is nothing but L. That L we have taken here, and mu1 Cox W into. Now what is this? So VGS minus VTN into VDS minus VC of y will become VC squared by 2, and after applying the limits, you will get this expression as VDS squared by 2. Okay, so just by integrating this, we get the expression for the current in the linear region. So this is the expression for current in the linear region. Okay, so as you increase the drain to source potential, what happens is that the channel at the drain end becomes narrower and narrower. Okay, let me just go back to my cross section here. So here what happens is, as you increase the potential at the drain side, as you increase VDS, what happens is that the channel at the drain end becomes narrower. If the channel at the drain end becomes narrower, you expect that the resistance to increase and the current to fall, right? Or the rate of increase of current to reduce, right? That's what happens. And that is what is seen here. As you increase the drain to source voltage, the increment in the drain current keeps reducing until it becomes flat at some point, right? So that is what is seen in the graph that of the characteristics of the transistor that we are familiar with, and that is what is evident from this equation in the linear region also. So going back, so that is what happens as we increase the drain voltage. The channel at the drain end keeps getting narrower and narrower. Therefore, the resistance keeps increasing, and at some point it gets pinched off. What point does it get pinched off? It gets pinched off when VDS is equal to VGS minus VTN. So if you recall, so if this is my VGS, source is at ground, and VDS is equal to VGS minus VTN. So what happens at this point is the gate to drain potential, V gate to drain, becomes exactly equal to VTN, right? So when drain to source is equal to VGS minus VT, the gate to drain potential becomes exactly equal to the VTN, which is the threshold voltage, which means that there is no inversion layer charges at the drain end, and that is what is known as the edge of saturation. And at this condition, the drain current can be written as, just all that we need to do is substitute VDS as VGS minus VT, and we get this expression for the current in the saturation region. So as we can see here, the current in the saturation region is constant. It is independent of VDS. Again, this is a first order approximation. You might all be familiar that there is something called channel length modulation, which gives a weak dependence of drain current on the drain to source voltage. We'll see that in a minute. Okay, so this is how we derive the this approximate expression for the drain current. Okay, let me just quickly recap what I have discussed till now. So we know that what are the assumptions we made? We made assumptions that the threshold voltage is constant and the conduction is uniform across this channel segment. We know that the resistance is not uniform. What we'll try to do is we'll try to find the incremental resistance of a small channel segment find the relation between the voltage and the current for that segment, integrate from source end to the drain end, and that will give us a complete expression for the drain current in terms of the gate to source voltage and drain to source voltage. Okay, so how did we find the expression for the incremental resistance? First we looked at the conductivity of this channel segment, of the small segment that we considered here, of this small segment. That conductivity is given by mobility into the charge of an electron into the density of charge carriers n of y in that segment. The density of the charge carriers can be written as the total number of charge carriers in that segment divided by the volume of that segment. W is the width here, d is the depth, and dy is the width of this small segment. So the WD into capital D into small dy is the volume of that segment, and the density of charge carriers is nothing but total number of charge carriers divided by the volume. Now we have, from that we wrote the conductivity as mu n into E into capital N of y upon WD into dy. All that we did was substitute for the density from the expression that we found. Okay, now E into N of y, this quantity, is the total charge in that channel in terms of coulombs, not the number of charge carriers, the total charge in coulombs. So that charge can be written as the density of charge into the or the density per unit area into the cross-sectional area of that segment. So W is this width, dy is this length. So the cross-sectional area is W into dy, and Q of y is the density per unit area of the charge carriers. Now, why did we do this? We did this because we can easily write an expression for the density of charge carriers in terms of capacitance and the voltage across the channel. So voltage across the channel is VGS minus VTN minus VC of y. This is because before VGS minus VT, there are no charge carriers. Charge carriers only get accumulated when VGS is greater than VT. And how much it is greater than VT, that is basically VGS minus VT minus VCY. That multiplied by the capacitance per unit area of the gate dielectric will give us the expression for the charge density. Now, using these all these expressions, we can just solve for sigma y and find an expression for the incremental resistance. That is what we did here. So dr we found as dy divided by mu n q of y into w. Okay, and using that incremental resistance, we found the voltage across the small segment of channel, which is dVc, given by IDS into dy upon mu n qi into w. Just rearranging this, we get this expression, and of course substituting for qy. So we get IDS into dy as mu n w Cox VGS minus VTN minus VC of y into dVc. VC of y is the potential at the segment at which we are looking at. So basically, it's the channel potential at the location y. Now integrating this expression from source to the drain, we get an expression for the current in the linear region, which is the famous expression that we all are familiar with. Now, at the edge of saturation, what happens is VDS becomes equal to VGS minus VT at that, or rather, it's the other way around. When VDS becomes equal to VGS minus VT, you are at the edge of saturation. And what happens at the edge of saturation is that the gate to drain potential, the potential difference between the gate and the channel at the drain end becomes exactly equal to VTN, which means that there is no inversion charge present at the drain end. And substituting that in the channel and the expression for current that we have, we get an expression for the current in the saturation region. Okay, if we increase the drain potential beyond this VGS minus VT, the pinch off point moves towards the source. This is what again we popularly known as channel length modulation. Right, so initially the channel would be something like this, pinched off at the drain end. If you increase the drain potential further, what happens is that the pinch off point moves towards the closer to the source. Okay, I am really exaggerating this just for illustration. The actual movement will be much smaller. So this is the drain end and this is the source end, right? So it basically changes from the pinch off point, moves towards the source. So this phenomenon is called channel length modulation. It is also called early effect because of a similar phenomenon in bipolar transistors. The mechanism is very different, but the final end result is similar between early effect and channel length modulation. So to find out what happens at the when the inversion or the pinch off point moves towards source, we look at the inversion layer charge at the source end, which is the inversion layer charge at this end is given by Cox into Vgs minus Vt, and the inversion layer at the charge at the drain end is given by Cox into Vgs minus Vt minus Vds. So this is at the edge of saturation. Okay, so if you increase VDS further, what happens if you increase VDS further is the inversion layer charge at the drain end becomes 0 and the pinch off point moves towards the source. So that means that effectively the channel length of this triangular channel that we have, effective length reduces to from L to L dash, which is where L dash is L minus delta L. Delta L is some small quantity by which the channel length reduces. This happens when VDS is greater than VGS minus VT. So what happens to the current in that conditions? So now we know that at y equal to L dash, which is the length of the new channel, which is now shrunk by some small amount, we know that the charge at that L dash is 0 because the inversion, that is the point at which the channel has been pinched off, and Vc of y at L equal to L dash is Vd sat. So we can write Id sat as 1 by 2 mu n Cox. Instead of W by L, we are writing W by L dash because the length of the channel L dash has length of the channel L has reduced from L to L dash. Okay, what L dash is L minus delta L into Vgs minus Vt and the whole square. Now, as VDS increases, L dash reduces further, which means that the drain current will keep changing. So now this we can write as mu n, Id sat as 1 by 2 mu n Cox W upon L minus L dash, L minus delta L into Vgs minus Vt and the whole square. Now I can write this as 1 by 2 mu n Cox into W upon L into, I've just taken L out of this bracket and write it as 1 minus delta L by L. Now if delta L by L is small, we can write 1 upon 1 minus delta L by L as almost equal to 1 plus delta L by L. This is just by using the expression, the series expansion for 1 upon 1 minus x. Okay, there are higher order terms which we are neglecting because delta L by L is small. So then we can write Id sat as 1 by 2 mu n Cox W by L into Vgs minus Vt and the whole square into 1 plus delta L by L. So now empirically finding an expression between delta L and VDS is, I mean in terms of physics it is quite complicated, but empirically delta L and VDS is given by, relation between delta L and VDS is given by delta L by L is almost equal to some constant lambda into VDS. This is an approximation that works well. The physics of the actual dependence between delta L and VDS is quite sophisticated, but empirically, when you look at measured measurements, or when you look at device simulations, we find that delta L by L equal to lambda times VDS is a reasonably good approximation. So then we can write this as IDS as 1 by 2 mu n Cox W by L into Vgs minus Vt and the whole square into 1 plus lambda into VDS. Now this lambda is commonly known as channel length modulation parameter, and its value depends on the technology. As the technology becomes smaller, the value of lambda becomes larger. For example, for 180 it's around 0.01. If you look at some 65 or 45 nanometer, you might take even values as high as 0.1. Okay, so again, till now we have all looked at equations for NMOS. The same method can be used for finding current equations for PMOS also. So in PMOS, the source is tied to the highest potential, and in NMOS, the source was tied to the lowest potential. In PMOS, the current equations is for VGS less than VTP, IDS is 0. Note that VTP is negative for PMOS. So gate to source potential is also negative. So when VGS is more negative than VTP, okay, that is when the drain current is 0. For VGS greater than VTP and VDS less than VGS minus VTP, the current equation is given as IDS is K into I should have written KP for PMOS, K into VGS minus VTP into VDS minus VDS squared by 2. And for VGS greater than VTP and VDS greater than VGS minus VT, again the equation is independent of VDS, given by K by 2 into VGS minus VTP the whole square. Okay, so sometimes it is a little difficult to grapple with the negative VT and negative gate to source potentials of the PMOS transistors. If you want a simple trick, one easy way to look at it is whenever you look at PMOS transistors, always look at the modulus values. Okay, so modulus of VGS is less than mod of VTP. So which means then the equations look very similar to the NMOS transistor also. So if mod of VGS is less than mod VT, then IDS is 0. If mod VGS is greater than mod VT and mod of VDS is less than mod of VGS minus mod of VTP, because all these are negative quantities, so the signs can sometimes confuse you. So if you take mod, then the equations become consistent with mod of all individual voltages and thresholds. The signs and equations become consistent with what we are familiar with NMOS. Okay, so if you find it difficult, just take mod. You will, and if you understand the NMOS well and just take the modulus, your signs will more or less be correct. Okay, so this is an easy way to analyze transistor circuits which are both PMOS and NMOS. If you get confused, if you are fine with it, then you don't need to. You can just ignore this. Okay, so what are the important parameters whenever you look at analog or mixed signal circuit design? There are two important parameters for any transistor. One is transconductance, second is output impedance, because almost any circuit, analog circuit that you take, its performance will be dependent on or will be characterized by how much transconductance you're getting out of the MOSFET and how high an output impedance that you have. So what is transconductance? Transconductance is nothing but change in output current for a small change in the gate to source voltage. Okay, so this can be computed very easily. So we have the equation for the drain current in the saturation region. So GM is nothing but dou IDS by dou VGS. So just by taking the partial derivative of IDS with respect to VGS, we get this expression as mu1 Cox W by L into VGS minus VTN. Now we can substitute for this small spelling mistake here, please ignore that. VGS minus VT from the current equation and write as GM as under root 2 mu1 Cox W by L into IDS. So what I have done, I've just substituted this VGS minus VTN is nothing but IDS upon 2 times of IDS upon mu1 Cox W by L. Right? So from this we can write this. I think entire thing is under root. So now this VGS minus VTN, if I substitute in the GM equation, I will get this expression for the transconductance as under root of 2 mu1 Cox W by L into IDS. Okay, so this is the expression for GM. I got in by taking dou IDS by dou VGS. By substituting for VGS minus VTN, I got the second equation for GM. Let me call this is equation 1. Second call equation 2. We can also substitute for mu1 Cox W by L. Okay, so from this expression, let me just write it here so that I don't have to switch too many times. into VGS minus VTN the whole square. I can substitute for mu n Cox W by L as 2 IDS upon VGS minus VTN the whole square. So if I substitute for mu n Cox W by L in this equation 1 as 2 IDS upon VGS minus VTN the whole square, I'll get a third equation for GM as 2 IDS by VGS minus VTN. Okay. So now if you look at these three equations, all these three equations are for GM, for transconductance. Which equation should we use for whenever we are looking at any circuit? Okay, so you see, let me take an example. Suppose you have a circuit in which you have a transistor and you want to increase the GM of the transistor. What should you do? Should you increase VGS minus VTN? So equation 1 tells us that if you increase VGS minus VT, the GM will increase, right? So for example, if I increase VGS minus VT, equation 1 tells me that GM will increase. Equation 2 tells me that GM doesn't change. And equation 3 tells me that GM actually reduces. So which one is correct? Is there something wrong in the equations? Can somebody comment on this?
No, all are correct.
So how do you know? So what is the meaning of this then? If all are
Actually,
correct,
it depends. It depends upon the condition. Suppose if W over L is fixed, then GM is directly proportional to overdrive voltage.
That's not
And
quite correct. W by L will always be fixed, right? I mean, it's
yeah, and suppose as far as the third equation, if you take, if IDS is fixed, then GM is inversely proportional to overdrive voltage.
So right, actually what happens is that the equation to use depends on the, see, all these equations come from one
yeah, it
parent
depends upon,
equation.
sir, it also depends upon configuration which you are using.
Right, it all the equation depends on the bias circuit. It depends on the biasing circuit. Okay, so all these equations for GM come from one equation, which is the current equation. Finally, that is the current equation that has to be that will be followed. So now it depends if in my bias circuit, if my bias circuit is configured in such a way that IDS is constant. Okay, if my bias circuit is configured such that IDS is constant, this happens in, for example, differential amplifiers. If IDS is constant in the in the bias circuit, then the GM will be dependent on, will be controlled by equation number 2, which is, in which case the GM is determined by the parameter which is fixed by the biasing circuit. For example, in a differential amplifier, which you might all be familiar with, the input common mode doesn't change the gain of the circuit, right? It has very good CMRR. That's what we keep talking about. What does that mean is that the gate to source voltage is determined by the circuit itself, but the biasing circuit is what fixes the GM. And if you're using a transistor in a circuit where the IDS is fixed by the biasing circuit, then you will use equation 2 for calculating the GM. For example, if you have a common source amplifier where the biasing basically fixes the VGS and there is no control of the drain current by the biasing circuit, in that case, the current equation will be equation number 1, which is, the transconductance equation that you should use will be equation 1, which is mu n Cox WL into VGS minus VTN. Okay, equation 3 is generally not, you should use equation 3 when you are, it's a somewhat unusual situation when biasing circuit forces the current as well as the gate to source voltage, and by design you choose the geometry so as to get the required GM. In that condition you will have to use equation 3. This is somewhat unusual, and most common circuits we cannot fix both IDS and VGS by the biasing circuit, it becomes there is limited use for that kind of a configuration. Okay, but for the sake of completeness, equation 3 should be used in a hypothetical situation wherein you have a situation where the biasing circuit fixes the gate to source voltage and also fixes the drain to source voltage, and W and L are chosen so as to get the required current through the transistor. Okay, then the last thing that is there is, what is the small signal output conductance of the MOSFET? This can be calculated again from the drain current equation by finding the partial derivative with respect to VDS. Okay, if there is no channel length modulation, then of course we know that the drain output impedance is infinite. But in the presence of channel length modulation, you will have a small value of output conductance, which will determine what is the output impedance. Okay, so this will nothing but be 1 by 2 mu n Cox W by L into VGS minus VTS the whole square. This is all independent of VDS until here, and the partial derivative of 1 plus lambda VDS with respect to VDS is nothing but lambda into VDS. Okay, so this can be written as sorry, this is not lambda into VDS, right? This is lambda, that's it. Okay, so this can be written as lambda into IDS, where IDS is the lambda into IDS is drain current without channel length modulation. So if you find the drain current without channel length modulation and multiply that with the channel length modulation parameter lambda, that will give you the output conductance. And this, of course, if you have the output conductance, output resistance can be written as 1 upon lambda into VDS. Okay, so this is just a quick review of basics of the MOSFET, how we find the current equation and how we find the transconductance and output impedance. So with this background, we will then from the next session we'll look at how to use these transistors in different kinds of circuits. So we'll start with operational amplifiers and two-stage op amps and how to compensate them and so on. Okay, so most of the things that I have discussed in this introductory session, you will find in these two textbooks. One is CMOS Digital Integrated Circuits Analysis and Design. Though the book is for digital circuits, the initial chapters do discuss modeling and approximations and this gradual channel approximation and whatever I've discussed in quite some detail. I think you should read that. The authors are Sang-Mo Kang and Yusuf Leblevici. It's a common book, commonly available book. And second one is also quite popular book for analog design, which is by Jacob Becker, CMOS Circuit Design, Layout and Simulation. This is the part 1 of the book. This is comes in 2 parts, and we'll mostly be referring to part 1. Part 2, I think, is mixed signal design or something like that. Okay. Okay. So if we have any questions, we can just quickly discuss them now. Otherwise, we will break now. We'll have the Atal inaugural ceremony at 11, and we'll start with the next session at 11:30.
Sir?
Yes.
This is Madhu Kadam from Sri Alpari College of Engineering. So
Yes,
I want
yes.
to just ask one question that that slide you just told, no, GM equation, this transconductance equation. So
Yeah.
can you just repeat that one, that part of? I'm not getting means when you have to use that first equation and when we have to use the second equation. Yes.
Okay. So how the 3 equations come is very is should be
Yes,
clear.
that is understood.
So for example, let me just so for example, okay, I think I can use this space here. I should find some way to. So if I have a differential amplifier, okay, in which IDS is this, and I apply my VCM plus V in here and VCM minus V in here. Okay, and I'll get my output voltage. So now if I want to find the transconductance of the transistors in this circuit, then what will I do? Which equation will I use? I do not know what is VGS because the source potential is not known. What happens in this case in the differential amplifier for the source potential is that if the input common mode increases, the source potential adjusts itself so that the same current I by 2 flows through this, right? So each current here, each transistor flows a current of I by 2. So if VCM increases, then the source potential also increases to maintain a constant, to maintain the required VGS in order to flow the current of I by 2. So VGS is something which is not fixed by the bias current. It depends on the input signal voltage conditions. So if the input common mode changes, then the gate voltage changes and the source voltage adjusts itself accordingly. But what is constant here in this case is the IDS. So I can find my GM as under root 2 mu n into IDS, right? That was the equation, or yeah. So in this case, the biasing circuit fixes the drain current and the source potential is something which is not fixed by the bias circuit. So it's very difficult to predict. So it's easy to find the GM in terms of the drain current here.
Okay, so that means here IDS is constant. That's why we have to use second equation.
Yes, whichever parameter is fixed by the bias
fixed. Yes. Okay,
that's
sir.
what you should use. So, for example, if there is a common source amplifier, in which case you will have the bias voltage, which is and the input signal is AC coupled. In this case, what happens is the gate to source voltage is fixed by the biasing circuit. So VGS is fixed. But what is ID? I don't know what is ID. ID depends on other things like what is the supply voltage used, what is the drain, what is the resistance at the drain, and so on. It depends on what is. It's not fixed by the biasing circuit as such.
Yes.
So in this case, you will use the first equation for GM, which is mu n Cox W by L into VGS minus VTN. Okay, the third equation is somewhat for academic completeness. We have written it. It's not a commonly used configuration where the biasing circuit fixes both the gate to source voltage and the drain current. It's a somewhat artificial situation which is not commonly used.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you. Understood. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, can we get a brochure of the because now brochure is not available on the site.
Oh, is it? It should have been okay. I will send it across in an email.
Okay, sir. Can we get these PPTs?
Yes. This also I will share across on an email. Just give me by today afternoon, by lunchtime, I will share it.
Oh, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other queries? Okay. Yes.
Hello.
Yes. May I know who is speaking? Deepesh. Yes, please tell me.
Sir, in the calculations, we have to take L or lambda into L value for the pen and paper calculation for designing purpose.
No, I didn't quite get you.
In the saturation current formula, you mentioned 1 plus lambda VDS as additional part. So whenever we are doing pen and paper calculation based on specifications, we have to consider lambda into L or only lambda value?
No, lambda itself will be a function of L. So, for example, even in 180 nanometer process, if you are using a transistor of 180 nanometer, which is the smallest possible transistor, it will have a certain value of lambda. If you use a transistor of 250 nanometer channel length in the same process technology, it will have a different value of lambda. So what we have to do is you have to find the value of lambda by plotting the drain current characteristic for that particular length, and then use that particular lambda for that length for your design. So generally, when we do analog designs, we use transistors which are larger in length than the minimum length. So, for example, typically 2 or 3 times the minimum length. But that means that the lambda also will change.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Okay, if there are no queries, we will wind up here. We will meet again at 11:30. At 11 o'clock, of course, for the inaugural ceremony. After that, we will meet at 11:30 sharp. We'll start again with the same link. And by afternoon, I will share the brochure and the presentation slides as and when we complete it. Okay, so let's take a break here and we'll meet again at 11 for the inaugural ceremony.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.